Welcome to FAQMP, that's Frequently Asked Questions for Your Member of Parliament. It's a social media show that tries to get beyond the political spin and headlines to get real answers to your questions. Today you voted Liberal immigration critic, or multiculturalism critic, Jim Karygiannis. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you for having me.
I've got lots of questions here for you. Actually, you have the record, the most number of questions ever asked to an MP.
Wow.
This is an hour show. I got over 50 here. There's no way we can get to them all, but I'll try and get to as many as I can. A lot of them are on multiculturalism and immigration. You seem to have really strong connections to those communities. And last year we had Minister Jason Kenney, Immigration Minister Jason Kenney on the show, and he talked about the backlog, and there's lots of questions here about the backlog.
Well, he talked about the backlog that he snuffed away at some point in time.
Well, here's what he had to say about the backlog. Let's take a look.
When our government came to office 5 years ago, in January of 2006, we inherited a backlog of about 850,000 applications in the immigration system with average wait times of 7 years, which is unacceptable. Now, this is not because we have inadequate operational resources. It's not because we lack an appropriate number of visa officers or public servants to process applications. That's not the problem at all. The problem is a mathematical problem. The problem is that in 2002, the previous government brought in a new immigration law which imposed on the government a legal obligation to process every single incoming immigration application to a decision.
So what he's saying there is that the backlog is a result of your government and legislation that you brought in. How much do you accept responsibility for that?
I'm not accepting any responsibility. People have the right to apply, and if they have the right to apply, they're in the queue. Now, if at some point in time we want us to say, listen, we need to stop the queue and let's deal with backlog, that's what you do. You do not go around and deleting people's applications. This minister, this government has deleted close to 300,000 applications. People that made a social contract with the government of Canada, they put their application in, they paid their money down, and they were waiting. And what does he do in an answer?
Waiting for many, many years.
Many, many years. And what does he do? He completely deletes them and he says, let's start anew. Not only that, he even does more drastic measures. He even puts a moratorium on people sponsoring their parents for 2 years. And he even puts a moratorium now if you can apply. So moratoriums I can understand, but snuffing away, deleting applications of people that put in, people that had a dream, people that have got little ones. I remember when I was applying to come to Canada, I was a little youngster. I've looked at the flag of Canada, I looked at videos and I say, this is where I want to go.
Really?
So he took that dream away of kids. I was in grade 6 and there was a video, the flag of Canada was just being done and we were showing videos of this in the classroom, and I remember Shadow Frontenac you had kids sliding down toboggans, and I said, this is where I want to go. So that to me was a dream to come to Canada.
And where were you when that happened?
I was in Greece. I was in Athens, Greece, just at the eve of a dictatorship, and what he did, he took away the dreams of the kids that were dreaming to come to Canada. Had I been that kid 46 years ago and he'd taken that dream away from me, that would have killed all what I believed about Canada. That's what he did.
It's funny you should say that, because my next question is from someone named Wang Zhong, who wrote into our website about the backlog. I'm applying for permanent residence in Canada. My son, my husband, and I have waited almost 54 months. I sent the application in September 2006. At the time, my son was 8 months old. He could only lay in bed and could not walk and speak. Now my son is 6 years old. However, we haven't heard any news about that. And interesting enough, she goes on, she gives her application number, her file number, her name, date of birth, telephone number, home address in China. And she's asking what you can do to help speed up the process.
One of the things that I did as a multicultural critic and reaching out to communities, we set up a website on my website, and I said to people, if you're experiencing that, let me know. And we've gotten something like about 4,000 emails. And it's interesting to note that a lot of these emails are coming from China, from South Asia, and Africa. I didn't get much response from Europe or the Eastern Bloc.
Right.
So to me, it will show that there was either a systematic approach in the areas that we're killing, or these are the areas that we're having problems and a lot of people are applying. One of the things that we would do with this individual, we will get in touch with them, open a file, and follow it up from my office.
Okay.
But again,
because she's given all her information, and I'll forward it to you.
And I would thank you for that.
Yeah. Is there anything, though, you can say to her that's like, her son is now 6 years old?
No.
How old is he going to be before she hears anything? A teenager?
Well, not only that, but I mean, it's the dream of a 6-year-old, and then how do you kill it? And Mr. Kenney has eventually, and this government has eventually done that. They killed the dreams of a lot of kids, dreams of families that want to come to Canada. And I can understand in saying to the people, look, we're not going to take any more cases until we deal with the backlog. But saying to the people that have applied, that have made a commitment, and they've got and the Canadian government has an obligation to deal with these cases, he completely just deletes them and snuffs them and just doesn't care. He just doesn't, I mean, this government is very inconsiderate and has broken a lot of people's hearts.
So what can you do about for this
Basically,
person?
we can find out where the application is, and probably at the end of the day, we will say to them, look, wait until it opens up again and apply. You know, and you also got to remember that a lot of people have hired lawyers and consultants, and they paid the lawyers and the consultants, and the lawyers and the consultants are not at fault. You know, to make applications, you can pay anywhere for $2,000 or $3,000 up to $10,000, and you know, and the lawyers will say to you, I can't help you. I mean, this government is at fault.
I have a few questions about immigration and healthcare. And I just completed a documentary looking at how the changes to the immigration system are affecting the healthcare of immigrants and refugees. I want to show you a clip from a protest that was held in Toronto from doctors.
Human rights, healthcare! Healthcare is human rights! Human rights, healthcare! Healthcare is human rights! Human rights, healthcare! Healthcare is human rights! Human rights, healthcare! Healthcare for whom? Healthcare for whom? Healthcare for whom? Healthcare for whom?
Doctors and nurses in Canada are angry.
Byron died in his apartment on the kitchen floor, completely emaciated, dehydrated, and choking to death. So it was just a horrible situation, and it gave me a view of my country that I didn't recognize. I never saw somebody die holding my arm, wondering in the last 2 weeks why his country wouldn't give him even palliative care.
The people of Canada, the people who are here in this land will remember. Stop the cuts now. Stop the cuts now. Stop the cuts now.
We're going to see children who lived in the most difficult of circumstances who are going to now come here to Canada for their safety and the dignity, the same things you and I take for granted that we want for our families, and we're going to kill them.
The government has gone too far and is way out of touch with Canadian values of fairness and just giving people a chance.
You know, my greatest fear is that people will die. I think it's plain and simple. And I think that if that happens, then Jason Kenney and this government is responsible.
In your capacity as the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, you essentially do have the authority to decide somebody's access to life-saving health care. How do you feel about having that sort of power?
I actually reject the premise of the question because I think anyone in Canada can access our health system. I don't think any hospitals, clinics, or practitioners deny people coverage.
Maratza Kawani wrote into our website with this question. If you become the next Prime Minister of Canada, what will be your first act to support immigrants and our healthcare system?
When my father applied to come to Canada as an immigrant, it was just at the eve of the dictatorship in Greece. And when we had the interview, they said to him, we'll send you your paperwork to go to Canada. My father did not hear, we'll send you your paperwork to go to Canada. My father heard, go to Canada. And we were on the first flight out, the eve of a dictatorship, and we came to Canada. And when we arrived here, the immigration officer said to us, where's your paperwork? And my father says, I don't have any paperwork. And they said, well, we're going to turn around and put you back on a plane to Greece, because we had absolutely no paperwork. And the translator at that point in time, Mrs. Basil, God rest her soul, turned around and said to my mother, claim refugee status in Greek. And we did. And it was not a question of you're going to have the hearings and all that stuff. It was a couple of questions, why, and all, and they stamped us in. Now, I know what the feeling is to come to this country to seek refuge. And 22 years later, I was made a member of Parliament. You know, it's emotional when I hear Mr. Kenney say those words, and he says that you got access at any hospital. You go to any hospital and you say, I'm sick and I don't have a health card. The first thing they're going to ask you is for your credit card. It is absolutely, you know, this is misleading, it's misinformation, and it's a slap in the face of people that are coming to this country seeking refuge. And as one of the people that came to this country seeking refuge, when you hear that we're not going to give you health care, but you can have the basic health care everybody else does. One of the things that Mr. Kenny doesn't say, until your refuge is being heard and until you're a credible refugee, then we give you your landing paper.
He cut all those.
He cut those back.
Support,
for
yeah.
what? I mean, you save a couple of $million bucks, and people are.
I think it's $5 million or something a year. It's not a lot of money.
No, it goes against the principle of Canadians and Canadian values, and this man should be ashamed to say that in public.
If your government came to power, would you reinstate interim federal health plan for
refugees? If our government comes to power, I've been hearing from a lot of our members of parliament, as well as our critic for immigration, and Bob Ray, which is our leader right now, that they will be reinstated. And I will fight to get them reinstated.
We'll be back right after this.
Why would a good God allow such horrible things to go on?
There may be somewhere a universe exactly resembling ours, a galaxy exactly resembling ours.
So the philosophical view and the religious experience appear to corroborate one another.
Reality divides into two. There's the mind and the body. There's the soul and the flesh.
Fridays at 7 p.m.
Welcome back. Joining me is liberal multiculturalism critic Jim Karygiannis. Welcome back to the show. We have lots of questions on multicultural immigration, but we also have one. Peter Young wrote into our website to ask about your pro-life stance. And just an update, Motion 312 was a motion that was brought in to sort of reopen the debate on when human life begins. The motion was defeated, as I'm sure you're aware. Were you disappointed that that motion was defeated?
The motion was something to create a conversation. Going into it, I mean, at the end result, we knew that it was going to be defeated. There was no question about it that it was going to be defeated. There was not enough votes on all the parties in order to support it. I've always said that we need to have education to the young ones in order to make sure that we protect the individuals. The situation when abortion is going to become legal in Canada or not, I think that's the horses have left the barn.
Yes.
I think what we need to make now sure is that we work with young ones. We work with other people and say, look, if you're planning to have a child, make sure that we're able to be there all the time. And if you get pregnant, there's other options that you have. You can certainly give the child up for adoption. I mean, a personal story. My fourth daughter, she got married to a young man that was given up for adoption. And Michael has been a delight to our family, and even to add that his biological parents were at the wedding. And now he's got 3 families: our family, his adopted family, and his natural family. And I mean, he's 30 years old. He's a welcome addition to my family. He's a son.
Well, you're sort of getting emotional about it. You're sort of answering a bit of Patrick's question, but he writes, how difficult is it for you to remain pro-life in the Liberal Party?
Absolutely not difficult at all. I mean, we're going back to Pierre Trudeau that said the members of Parliament, they have the right to vote with their conscience. And I voted with my conscience. But again, as I said, this issue is an issue that right now we have to work with the young ones in order to educate them that there's other options, and they have to make sure that if they're going to participate, that they should be safe sex that doesn't end up in a birth or somebody getting pregnant. And if that is the case, then they have the right, and they have an option. I mean, they can give the child up for adoption. So, I mean, I'm looking at Michael 30 years later.
Would you like to see the debate on abortion reopened in Canada, though? Is that a goal you have?
You know what? That debate has certainly, it's like a bird flew over the cuckoo's nest. That debate is over, but I think the debate has to continue of how do we provide support for the children so they don't get into that difficult situation.
And his part 2 of his question, which you're sort of answering now, is how can you help bolster the voice of the voiceless in your party? So I guess there is a number of pro-life people still in the Liberal Party. That's what he's saying.
It's not a pro-life issue. I mean, this is an issue that how do we support the young ones and how do we give them the best advice and what government support is there in order to, as we move forward, to make sure that we have a society that cares about young people and works with young people in all stages. I mean, in school, in university, in safe sex, and the whole 9 yards.
And is it difficult for you to maintain that position? I guess he's getting at it. What I'm trying to get at is the Liberal Party is very clear about their position on abortion, and yet he seems to be saying that you're taking a sort of a different position, yet you're in a party that is very clear about it. Why wouldn't you be a conservative, for example, if that's such an important personal issue to you?
It is a personal issue to me, but the Liberal Party is not an issue. It's not a party that is that wears blindfolders and you know, steers you in one direction. We have the option of voting with our conscience, and I did.
We have a number of questions for you about Coptic Christians. And you've been very supportive of this minority community. Just for people who don't know, this is one of the oldest Christian communities in the world, about 10% of the population of Egypt. And Rafat, assuming is a Coptic Christian, and he wrote into our website with this question. We left our homeland because of discrimination in the Middle East. We came to Canada, a country of freedom, but there are people who abuse this freedom. Now we see the shadow of the same philosophy starting to grow and increase in Canada. How can you be sure that future generations do not export their terrorism here?
Well, Canada is a country that welcomes everybody to their shore, and we need to work with all ethnic communities and all ethnic minorities to make sure that we maintain a balanced approach and the rights of the individuals are there for all. What is happening even today in Egypt is horrible. There was a situation that I read coming in that there was a young lady that was approached, and the gentleman, an Islamic gang leader or something, said to her that I'm going to take you and you're going to be my wife, and she left home, and then there was a whole bunch of shooting and a whole bunch of people dying. This is the stuff that we need to voice, and this is the stuff that we have to say. The international community has to say to Egypt, as well as other as well as other countries that do not have religious freedom, that we're not going to accept this. You go to India, Kandahar, Orissa, 2008, there was 40,000 people, Christians interned, there was 170 churches burned, and nun rape, 170 people killed. Again, a country that is one of the most dynamic countries in the world and does not have religious tolerance or religious acceptance. You go to Indonesia, you go to Pakistan, you go to the Middle East. It doesn't matter if they're Christian, if they're Muslims, whatever it is. Those differences should not be coming into our country, and if they do come to our country, we have to voice them out and say to people, listen, stop it, or else, you know, we don't appreciate that. But again, going back to the Coptics, the Coptic community in Egypt is facing a difficult time. There is a parliamentary friendship of the Copts that it was started, and I'm still involved with it. And we need to work with all parties. I don't think there's one party in the House of Commons that does not support the plight of Christian Coptics in Egypt.
Is there anything that you can do for Rafat, though? I think he's feeling that because people are coming to Canada who share, you know, aren't very don't like the Coptic Christians. He's feeling the same sort of persecution happening
I
here.
think that he's bringing a little bit of difficulties from back home, and when he sees people that look a little different or dress a little different, he gets reminded of what happens in Egypt. There's people that write into me and say we don't like to support the hijab, we don't like to support the niqab, and I said to them, you know what, an individual wearing the niqab does not mean that you bring.
So this is a Muslim veil you're talking about.
This is the Muslim veil,
yeah.
and there's,
which
you know,
scares them probably.
It scares the heck out of them, and certainly the Minister Kenny went into Quebec and he said that people taking the oath should not wear the niqab, and it's very simple. You know, a woman can take the niqab off in front of an immigration officer, a female, and a female judge. So, you know what, those differences from back home, we shouldn't bring them with us, and we shouldn't be scared of a person looking a little different. So to the individual, I say to them, look, we're there to work with you, we're there to make sure that we voice the difficulties that are in Egypt. The Canadian government needs to voice those and not only voice them, but be very firm with Egypt as to what is going. I have a constituent that the movie The Innocent of Muslims,
yes.
He was one of the individuals that is coming up for trial. They've got his name on the list. And when I went to the government and I said, look, what are you going to do about it? The government, the minister turned around and basically said, like, Karygiannis, you should keep your mouth shut, if I can put it as such, and we're going to work with it in simple channels. Well, this man still has a bounty on his head. There's a fatwa that, you know, you can kill him. So actually, you know, the government has to step up to the plate.
And that's, I think, what these people are afraid of, is this sort of thing is now taking hold within Canada. I mean, do you agree with that there are
you know,
serious problems?
There's some fears there that I certainly, although I share in their fears, I don't share in their philosophies. And I'm working with individuals, number one, to say, look, I understand that you got a fear, and I can understand that we need to work on the fear, but one of the things that we need to do collectively is make sure that the government in Egypt hears these words, not only in Egypt, but throughout the world. The governments that don't respect human rights, do not respect freedom of religion, and do not have freedom of the press, those governments should be told about it, and if they belong to a group like the G8 or the G20, they should be sanctioned.
Speaking of homegrown conflicts, we ran a poll on our website recently about Omar Khadar's return to Canada. And most people voted on the site that he should not have been returned to Canada. How do you feel about that?
He's a Canadian citizen. He was he was a child soldier. He's a Canadian citizen. You know, as much as people don't like or dislike, he's a Canadian citizen. This is our responsibility, and we need to bring him back home. And if we need to deal with it here.
Well, we'll be back with more after this.
We've discovered that 70% of the energy of the universe resides in empty space. It's totally inexplicable. It's changed everything.
We actually have a combined 2D and 3D shot of a person's face.
We can't find a healthy brain in an ex-football player. It's quite scary.
Welcome back to FAQMP. I'm Kevin O'Keefe, and I'm here talking with liberal multiculturalism critic Jim Karygiannis. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions here that I like to throw in, my own questions. You've been very honest and forthright and even a little emotional about how you feel about certain issues. But I'm wondering, what's the issue that breaks your heart the most in your riding, in government? What's the issue that really touches you?
The inability of citizens to be able to get answers from their elected officials, as well as the government. The inability of an individual to pick up the phone and call immigration, to call employment insurance, to call a government official and say, give me what is on my file. Tell me what's on there. I mean, we moved from having immigration officers where people can go in and find what they are to doing it over never mind by the phone, to do it over by mail. And if something goes wrong, there's nobody there that you're able to say, look, yeah, maybe I made a mistake on my form. Don't kick me out of Canada. Maybe I didn't have the right answer. Maybe I did not know how to do this. I think we need to get back to basics, and I think we need to have a government, I don't care if it's Liberal, Conservative, or NDP, the government that is able for us to be able to contact the individual and to either get answers from the government or to be able to supply answers that maybe we didn't the first right time. I mean, if you want to get an extension for a visitor visa, you mail something in. If by any chance you ticked off the wrong thing, you're rejected. There's absolutely no means, and you know. So we need to get a government that is compassionate. We need to get a government that cares. I realize that doing this kind of business with the government is a lot of money and it takes a lot of people. But if we are to be asking people to pay up and pony up for what they do and everything is cost recovery, then we need to be responsible as well as on time. You apply for the citizenship, it can take you up to 2 years before you get it. You apply for old age security, and 9 times out of 10 you have to go to your MP, and your MP becomes your advocate. So our offices are becoming advocates for our constituents. Now, of course, there's the other flip side, that if you harness this well, that you can get a lot of votes. But
you can get a lot of votes.
Well, listen, I've been successful in doing that. But I think that we need to make sure that we as a government are answerable to the people.
And what can you do about that? I mean, the Liberal government is so small right now in Ottawa. I mean, what impact can you have in that?
The Liberal Party is the third party. And one of the things that we need to do ourselves is start listening to our constituents. We, as the Liberal Party, lost the last election because we got a little bit cocky, if you want to call it. And one of the things that I say is that we need to start listening. And I've instituted hearings right across the country, and I've taken them, and we listened as a person responsible for community stakeholders outreach, and we're listening to different groups, what they have to say, and I'm bringing this back to caucus. And I hope that continues with our next leader.
What's the biggest asset in your riding? What do you see as the biggest asset?
84% of the people that live in my riding are ethnic communities and people that have come to Canada. 84%.
Where's your riding?
Scarborough Agincourt.
So
northwest part of Scarborough. You sort of go to Brimley and the 401 and you look northwest, and that's it.
So a lot of people would see that as a disadvantage.
Absolutely
Why do you
not.
see it as an advantage?
Absolutely not.
Why?
As an advantage because we don't only cater to one language, we cater people in multi-languages. I mean,
but that would be so complicated. Like how many languages? There must be dozens.
We send brochures out during the election in 18 languages.
18 languages.
We have the capability of 8 languages at a given moment in my office, plus we have partners and friends and community people that we can get to about 30 languages within 30 seconds.
So,
you call
so far
in,
that seems
we
very
ask you what language.
complicated.
No, it's very simple. You call in, we
simple.
ask what language you speak, and we get the other person on the phone, volunteer a friend or whatever, and automatically they tell us what they want. You're wanting to come to our office, the first thing that we do, we notice if there's another language, and we'll say to you, look, we'll make it a point for you to come when we have somebody that can translate for you. It's not rocket science, it's simple.
So why do you see that as an asset, though?
It is an asset because when you service a person in his own language, not only does he appreciate it, but it's also an asset because you got their support for a long time. I mean, I look at my mom. My mother is 83 years old. She does not speak a word of English.
You're kidding.
She didn't go to school when this is back World War II years, and she's in Canada. And when the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was translated into Greek, she started syllabizing it, and she got to a paragraph on the third column, and she says to me, what does that mean? It was about multicultural and heritage language. I said, Mom, that pretty well means that if the local government doesn't pay about, kids learning heritage language, the federal government is going to do that. And that was the time that we were going through some troubles in Scarborough. Scarborough was a board of its own and didn't want to pay for heritage languages. And she says to me, does that mean that your daughters will have an opportunity to learn their heritage language? I said, Mom, that's what it says. She says, press and work on it. That was one of the beginnings of me starting to work to become a member of Parliament.
And how do you see that diversity as an asset to your riding, though? I'm still like, what's the strength of that?
The diversity of Toronto by 2015, 67% of Toronto is going to be ethnic, different ethnicities.
67%.
67% of the predictions. Visible minorities and people with long last names. If you're able to work with the ethnic communities and not only work and pay lip service to them, but really be able to perform and to be able to reach a goal and bring something to the table, I think those communities would never leave you. And after 24 years as a member of Parliament, they've been there with me.
But how do you see that as an asset to Canada? I see that as an asset to you getting you reelected, but what does that do to the country?
This country was founded, I see Canada having 4 pillars: the First Nations, the 2 founding nations, the French and the English, and you cannot hold the table up with only 3 pillars. And the 4th pillar is our multicultural communities, people that have immigrated to this country in the last 100 to 150 years from different parts of the world, and they keep this country together.
Some people would say that divides the country.
Far be it from it. Absolutely, I disagree. People, look, I mean, I know where you're going, and I'll tell you one thing. When you go down to Greektown on the Danforth in Toronto, they say it's a Greek ghetto.
Yeah.
No, you know what? It's not a Greek ghetto. It's not, if you go to Thorncliffe Park, it's not a South Asian ghetto. These are different places that we bring together. No longer is Danforth or Little Italy on Gerrard Street, College Street, no longer is it Italian. There were the Italians that lived there, they moved on, and the name of the street still lives, and there's the flavor of the street is still there.
The same thing with Greektown. Still there.
Exactly, and think about the people that just go down. I mean, Taste of the Danforth, you got 1.5 million people. Where is the ghettoization? There's 1.5 million people that come together in order to celebrate a day in Greek history and in Greek culture. The same thing in Little Italy, the same thing in all the areas. It is an asset because when you drive into Ottawa and you see Little Italy, you see, it tells you, you say, okay, if I want to have Italian dinner tonight, I can go have Italian dinner, and then maybe I will go to little, South Asia and have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and that's where the beauty of it is all. And we all bring into Canada different backgrounds, and together we move forward.
All right, well, we'll be back with more with Jim Karygiannis right after this.
"12 ordinary people with 12 extraordinary ideas get the chance of a lifetime."
This is a dream. Being an inventor is what I want to do.
When you can take a product that you've come up with and actually get it into the hands of some people like yourself and see that we got a shot.
Who hope their sweat, tears, and yes, their innovative ideas can go all the way to become products in the American marketplace.
You guys are everyday Edisons. You're on the show.
Welcome back to FAQMP. I'm here with liberal multiculturalism critic Jim Karygiannis. Welcome back, Jim. We received many questions about conflicts in Africa. And I could see why we would get, I mean, you're very connected to the Coptic Christians and to the Greek community. I just want to ask you, why do you think clearly people from this part of the world have a strong connection with you? Why? You don't look African to me.
Look, I've been involved with all the communities, be it in China, be it Burma, be it South Asia, be it Pakistan. And one of the latest communities that is having trouble is the people in the DRC, the Congo, as well as the Nigerians. And I came back from Libya last summer when I was there as an election observer. But the DRC community, the Democratic Republic of Congo, something about a year ago, almost to the date, I was invited to go and speak to them about democracy and about democracy building. And then the election happened, and I raised that in the House of Commons. And since then, we are working with the community to develop the Canadian Friends of the Congo as the Parliamentary Friends of the Congo in order to advocate for democracy, in order to advocate that when Canada does business with them, that we bring forward the democratic aspect. And just the Prime Minister last week was in Kinshasa, a couple of weeks ago, and actually he said that, he practically came out and said that we're not going to do any business with you. We're not going to do anything with you unless the democratic rule of law comes back. And I got to tell you, for 30 seconds there, I was very proud of Mr. Harper and what he did, and I got to give him credit. Yeah. But the community has sent numbers of emails. We had sent letters. I had sent letters co-signed with General Dallaire, which was there's an association of prevention of genocide. Right. And when you work with different members of parliament, you work with different communities, you come about bringing change, and you come about bringing results.
Well, I want to ask you, Mark Capan wrote into our website about the Congo, and he says, I know the Congo minerals are strategic to our industry. Many Canadian companies are involved in the humanitarian disaster related to the exploitation of mineral resources in the eastern part of the Congo. How would you help reconcile the protection of our interests and the promotion of human security of Congo people?
There was
a conflict there with where we want the minerals, but we also want human rights.
We certainly want the minerals, and if you use your phone, a lot of the phone components on your mobile phone are minerals that come from the Congo. Really? And one of the things that we must do is, when we're working not only with Canadian companies, but with other companies worldwide, is that they must have an ethics citizenship, the business ethic, like the good business ethic that not only looks after the people in the area but does not exploit them. Unfortunately, in Africa, exploitation, when you look at blood diamonds or anything else, the exploitation is certainly there. And one of the things that we got to tell Canadian companies, as well as the Canadian government has to step in and make sure, in working with other international partners, we don't exploit the beauty that is called Africa. We don't exploit the Africans, and we certainly not use them and abuse them. And unfortunately, a lot of that has been happening.
Well, I guess some people will be watching this saying, why should we care? Like, this is in Congo, this is in Africa. What does it matter to us in Canada? Why should we care?
Human life should be respected at all parts of the world. People's religion, the right to religion, the right to have a free press and human rights. I mean, if you don't care about your neighbor, you don't care about the rest of the world, then what the heck are we doing as citizens of this globe? I mean, where does our responsibility stop? And where do we, as parliamentarians or as Canadians, do not lead by example? I mean, we've won award after award of what we're doing in this great world, and people look at us as a difference. I mean, when you travel abroad, I've seen a lot of examples where American colleagues or American friends will travel with me, and they get a Canadian backpack with a Canadian flag on top of them.
Do you think that's changing at all, though, given the current situation?
It has been changing.
Are you experiencing that when you travel abroad now, that flag isn't as readily put on our backpack, just given our role around the world?
And when I travel abroad and people ask me where you're from, I said I'm a Canadian. And up to now, even to this day, people are looking at you very friendly with a smile on their face. And I think that we need to make sure that continues. I think we need to change our direction where we're going, instead of closing embassies, and instead of saying we're going to share an embassy with another country, and instead of following other countries' foreign affairs policy, we should definitely have foreign affairs policy that's made in Canada by Canadians for Canadians.
So you don't agree with the embassy sharing? Because we have a couple of questions on that too.
Absolutely not.
Really?
I do not agree with embassy sharing. I don't agree about closing down embassies.
You think it's more cost effective?
You know what? If you're going to be
Burma and Haiti is the first two embassies that are going to be shared with the UK.
If you're going to be a player in the world politics and foreign affairs, you have your own flag, you stake your own claim, and you fly your flag. I certainly would not want to go into Burma. All the work that we've done for Burma and everything that we've done, Aung Suu Kyi being as a Canadian honorary citizen, the fight that the Burmese community did in Canada, the fight that we did in order to promote democracy there. I'm also the chairperson of the Parliamentary Friends of Burma. So I do have an invested interest being in Burma. So you know what? If somebody else wants to share our embassy and under our flag, I got no problem. But when we share embassies with others, And
With
we
the
are
UK specifically.
I wouldn't say UK or any other country, like the Italians in Iran. If I'm in Iran, a Canadian citizen in Iran, and all of a sudden something happens, do I go to the Italian and say, you know, I need some help? The Italians are going to say, look at me and say, do you speak Italian? If I speak Italian, I might be happy. You know, honestly, if I'm in Iran and I get into troubles, I'll use my Greek passport and go to the Greek embassy and say, get me out of here. I will have difficulty going to the Italians because, number one, I don't speak Italian. Number two, they're there to protect their own citizens.
What about people who would argue that, well, we're so close together, Canada and the UK, it's not that big a deal? And it's going to save us a lot of money if we share embassies. What do you say? It's a good...
Saving money is one thing, and there's money that we can save in other areas, but when it comes to the foreign diplomacy, we cannot go down this road. We can't shut embassy after embassy. We can't shut immigration post after immigration post. We need to be responsible, and when we're doing things on cost recovery, you just can't go ahead and close posts as well as immigration visa sections.
I want to get back to the Congo for one more minute. We got off topic there, but you also have a petition you mentioned briefly there about the Congo urging our government to ensure democracy returns to the Congo. Why is that important? Why,
it is important, and I am pleased to say that the Office of the Prime Minister took the right steps. I think the petition that we engaged and people writing in had an effect, and I will tell you that I will, and working with different communities, when they write, when they voice their opinion, it certainly has an effect and it certainly shapes our foreign affairs policy, as well as any policy.
This is a bit of a embassy question. Julius wrote into our website to ask, why do Nigerians have to travel all the way to Ghana for their landed interviews and papers?
As well as the same thing as Iranians have to travel all the way to Ankara recently for their interviews and papers, and there's other posts that are closing. There's posts in East Europe that are closing. We closed the post in Buffalo. So this is, you know, this is not unusual to Nigeria, but the Nigerian community being one of the large communities that I work with and having expressed those troubles, and you know, and Julius, I want to thank you for the question, but instead of opening more visa posts, we're closing them. And instead of having more posts that look after immigration, we're closing them. I had an individual last night that wrote to me, my wife's been waiting for a year in order to come to Canada. And when I looked at the file, we got an answer back from the post that says 2 other offices closed and their files were migrated here. And therefore, we don't have extra resources in order to look after them. So I sympathize with what they were saying. I understand what they're saying, but it's not only to Nigeria. There's other parts of the world that we closed office after office, and even to the south of us. We closed Buffalo office, and we paid 10 years in advance the rent. So we're on the hook for that. So this government certainly is mismanaging the files of a lot of countries and puts people to strain. And we have
Is there anything that you can do to help Julius?
One of the things that we'd like to reinstitute, I'd like to speak to our caucus about reinstituting, is opening the visa post fully, not only for visitor visas, in Nigeria in order to look after them. Or if we're not going to open offices, we make sure that we have more area trips by immigration officers into those countries in order for their files to be expedited more. These people are paying good money in order to sponsor their families to Canada, and they should be given the same service as somebody which is in Britain, somebody which is in France, versus somebody which is in, you know, in Africa, and their files are taking longer. I had asked, when I was in the Committee of Citizenship and Immigration, I've asked some of the officials, I said, why is it taking so long from here and here and here? And the answer that they gave is because, well, the post office does not work, these countries are a little different and all that stuff. And I said, well, isn't Jamaica almost like Canada? Yeah, why is it taking 2 years out of Jamaica? And then I went off track a bit and I said, this is why you're doing it, and it was not appreciated by the officials. As well, I had to apologize, but you know what? When you clearly
What do you mean
see,
this is why they're doing it? What did you say?
There's African source countries. And from that particular area, it's taken a little bit longer.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know what's taking longer, but the stats are there. And if you look at Africa and you look at...
Is it because they're not as desirable? I'll say it.
I said that, and it's on tape, and certainly I had to, you know, to apologize. But the results and the stats are there. And when you look at places like the Middle East, and you look at places like South Asia, especially from Pakistan, it's taken 2 years. Out of Sri Lanka, it's taken 2 or 3 years to bring your wife in. And if you go to England or you go to Greece and you sponsor your wife, it's taken 6 months to a year. So why is the inequality? If you're European, it takes a year, and if you're South Asian, it takes 2 years, or if you're African, it takes 2 years. Why the inequality?
Why?
Aren't the people the same? You know,
it's the same procedure, yeah.
It's the same procedure as well as these are people. So when you're telling me that I don't have the resources here and I got the resources here, then put more resources.
But this is a time of government cutbacks, Jim. We have a big deficit we have to cut back.
Cutbacks and deficits, and that means keeping families apart for 2 years, like husbands and wives? I don't buy this. I'm sorry. Families are priority number one with any government. And if the government of Canada does not prioritize and make sure that family class applications, husbands and wives and children that siblings, I mean children under the age of 22 are not allowed to come just as fast as they come from another place, I don't buy it. User resources, families are priority. Families should be number one. No ifs, ands, or buts.
More with Jim Karygiannis right after this.
To me, there is no difference between the garden and art.
It's a habitat for life.
Gardening just takes us into the middle of the web of life.
Welcome back to FAQMP. Joining me is Liberal Member of Parliament Jim Karygiannis. Welcome back, Jim.
Thank you.
Rob Etchison and Bill both wrote into our site with questions about something called the Department of Peace. It says, you have co-seconded Bill C-373 calling for the creation of the Department of Peace. Why do you think such a department is necessary?
Let me thank both of them, and they're tremendous individuals and they work hard.
So you know them personally?
I know personally, and they've done a lot of good work, and there's Department of Peace chapters right across Canada.
Really?
And there's 2, maybe 3 countries that have a Department of Peace. This Department of Peace, and it depends how you see it and which part you want to twist it. The Department of Peace is something that they say how we mediate in Canada and between groups and find peace. And what I foresee as the Department of Peace is what can Canada do in the world by harnessing the greatest thing we have, the diasporas. There's diasporas in Canada that have differences back home. Can we not use the diasporas from back home and their differences and harness them and working with them and provide for them sustainable development for nation building and provide for them the tools that they speak to their prospective home countries and say, look, we don't appreciate what is happening. We want to have a solution. We want to have peace and peace, be it between Greece, Cyprus, and the occupied part of the north, be it between India and Pakistan and the difficulties they have with Kashmir, be it with different religion aspects, and working with them to be able to and providing for them the tools that are needed, be it office space, be it seed money in order to do this. Then it will provide our diasporas, and we'll be able to have an influence in that country. I'll give you an example. I just came back from the Kurdistan regional government in the north part of Iraq.
Yeah,
and
yesterday you were there.
and I found people there that are actually Canadians and working in order to build, the northern part of Iraq. I was in Libya for the elections, and I found one of the commissioners that was looking after the elections was a Canadian PhD that was back there in order to do this. Now, these people are doing it on their own, but if we do it with the support of the Government of Canada, if we were to promote peace, if we were to promote engagement, we will be a country not only that is better in the world, that will be respected, but would also have our values and our ways of doing things through the diaspora and through what the diaspora needs be brought back. And once they're brought back, you also build bridges for trade. I mean, if you look at our diasporas, our second largest trading partner is China. It is not because of the Government of Canada, and it's not because of Harper. Harper didn't know go to China for about 6 years. It's because of the diaspora and what they're building. So if you work with the diasporas, if you work with them in some areas that there's difficulties, it would only benefit the Canadians and only benefit Canadian trade.
Speaking of peace, Erme Garcia wrote into our website with this question. What's your opinion on the recent breaking of relations with Iran by the Harper government? Is it good for Canada?
In closing our embassy in Iran, we don't have ears and eyes on the ground. I wrote to a lot of Iranians, and matter of fact, there was a poll that I've done directly sending letters to Iranian homes, and all but one wrote back that our visitor visa section in Iran should close. So vis-a-vis, if you only one person says close the visa section in Iran. That means people want an embassy there. Therefore, the Iranian community, the Iranian diaspora certainly does not feel and it does not appreciate the closing of the Canadian embassy in Iran. You are there to service the Canadians' needs, and if you fail the community here, you certainly fail the community there.
You don't think it should have been closed?
No, absolutely not.
Do you believe that there's a real nuclear threat from them, from Iran?
It's
I mean,
interesting. It's interesting that you're asking that question, because that was the hottest topic when I was in Iraq. Should something like that go on, and you have to realize that the people that I was there with the Kurdish, there's a lot of Kurdish people that are from Iran that were at this conference, and we were chatting with them. And a lot of them were saying that should something like that happen and the country were to break apart, or there's a change in the country, then certainly Canada can play a real role in there with the way that we're having a Canadian government, a federation, and it can certainly make sure that a federation happens in Iran as well as in Iraq.
If we still had our embassy there, you're saying?
Well, not only our embassy there, but if we had influence in the area.
Presence, yeah.
Our influence in the area is very little. The conversation was that should things not change, that there would be a particular country that might do surgical strikes, as they done in Iraq back in the 1980s.
And they were saying this is a possibility?
That's a possibility.
I think we should stop there. We'll be back with more with Jim Karygiannis after this.
If you're a new immigrant or refugee in Canada,
I need some help, and I can't afford to. Sorry.
You better not get sick.
Does he find it difficult to breathe?
That it's irresponsible. That if you want to make sure that if your parents get sick that they're covered, that you better get health insurance.
So would you refuse care then if somebody couldn't afford to pay?
Absolutely not.
By the time the child arrived, the child was dead.
His hand was on my hand, and when it relaxed, he died.
Because these days in Canada,
so I'm puzzled by the last question.
It's your money or your life.
It gave me a view of my country that I didn't recognize.
Welcome back to FAQMP. We're here with Liberal Member of Parliament Jim Karygiannis. Jim, Luke Dukas wrote into our website with this question. How can you support Bob Rae, in brackets former NDP, as leader? Isn't there an actual true Liberal to lead the party?
Well, Mr. Rae was the interim leader. We voted for him, the caucus, and the man is not running for leader, and we have a leadership race, and there's a few people that step forward and are running.
Question 2, would you consider running? Why or why not?
The consideration was there. I thought about it. As I said to the person that interviewed me, I said, if Mr. Trudeau runs, it's a fait accompli.
Really?
It is fait accompli. Mr. Trudeau well, there's other people, there's other players as we go along, but if you're going to run, you're going to run to win, and if you're not going to win, then why bother running?
We had a poll on our website about Justin Trudeau, and we said, what would he do for the Liberals if elected leader? And an overwhelming majority said he would be the next Prime Minister of Canada. Do you agree?
I share their thoughts.
Really? Why? Why do you think he's such a...
There is the name of Trudeau. There is the rock star status. There is the aura, and a lot of people want to live that aura of Trudeau mania again. The older ones want to live it because they remember Trudeau and when back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The younger generation wants to relive what their parents lived, and there's a lot of following. I think this is an interesting race. It strives to bring people into the party. It has an atmosphere of wanting to be there. It has an atmosphere of I want to be a supporter or a member. And I think we're going to see a rejuvenation of the Liberal Party. And as we've seen in the latest poll, we're second place at 30%. And that all has to do with probably with Justin dropping his name into the hat.
There are people, though, that have also accused him of, as you said, there's the rock star status, the name, but they don't know what his platforms are, and they see that as a detriment.
Like I said, I'm not at this moment supporting anybody. I'm listening to what they all have to say, and I will probably make a decision as to where I go. But the status is there, and if he fills rooms, There's what I hear from people is that there's the essence of liberalism is alive, and he draws big crowds, and that's, you know, perception is the key.
I think we should stop there. That's a good plea. Thank you very much for coming in today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, that's it for FAQMP for today. I want to thank everyone for sending in the questions. Please go back to our website, see who's up for election, vote, and send in the questions. The show does not work without your participation. So I'm Kevin O'Keefe for all the FAQMP team. Good day.
I want to thank you for watching FAQMP. This is Jim Karygiannis. I want to thank all the people that voted for me, and I want to thank everybody that wrote in with your questions. Really appreciated all your support.